Hello, everybody. Welcome to JMU College of Business Business Insights Speaker Series. My name is Mert Tukman. I'm a professor of marketing and logistics in the College of Business and also the coordinator for the Global Supply Chain Management minor at JMU. I'm your host today. During the month of May, our speaker series have been focusing on supply chain disruptions caused by COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we have the third one of our 4 speaker events for this month. You can access the recordings of the 2 previous events at JMU College of Business YouTube channel. Our speaker today is Mr. Brian Tilton. Brian is a leader in Deloitte's supply chain and network operations practice with more than 25 years of experience helping commercial and government organizations transform their enterprise product development and engineering, product sustainment, and supply chains via strategy development, execution, and technology initiatives to include systems engineering, product lifecycle management, product data management, blockchain, and Internet of Things. He's a certified Scrum Master, project management professional, and a certified Internet of Things professional. His market expertise spans commercial startups, commercial aerospace and defense, national manufacturing institutes, and each of the Department of Defense military services to include direct support to Office of Secretary of Defense and Joint Service Working Groups, program executive offices, program offices, sustainment depots, field activities, and warfighter-focused organizations. Mr. Tilton has proudly served as a key advisor to several large-scale information technology initiatives to include the U.S. Air Force's Enterprise Logistics for 21st Century campaign, where he led key aspects of the product lifecycle management initiative focused on delivering the right information and parts at the right time to the right place, every time. And to the Army's Enterprise Business Systems Convergence Initiative as a business process reengineering team lead with responsibility for helping the Army re-engineer its entire integrated supply chain process from factory to foxhole. Brian is a graduate of James Madison University and currently serves as a valued member of JMU Global Supply Chain Management Executive Advisory Board. Before we start Brian's presentation, I'd like to remind the audience that we will take live questions after Brian's talk, and you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. Brian, the stage is yours now. We can start your talk.
Hey, thanks, Mert. Appreciate the warm introduction and certainly honored and appreciative of this opportunity from the College of Business and JMU and the Dean. So thank you all very much. Nothing shines brighter in me than my pride in my time at JMU and my continued affiliation with the university. I couldn't be prouder of the things that JMU has achieved with its student body. And certainly, I know the impact that the education, the network, the lessons I learned, the friends I made at JMU have had on my life. So again, love contributing to JMU, happy to be part of it, and really honored and grateful for the opportunity. So thank you all. Honored to be a guest speaker today. This is a topic that certainly I've had, as we all have had, kind of a personal perspective on is the COVID-19 pandemic. Certainly took us all, took our breath away, literally. I think some of us, about this time last year, and it's been a real challenge. From a supply chain perspective, I would ask this: if someone were to say, "Come flying with me," I don't know how to fly. The plane doesn't have autopilot, and we're not going to have parachutes. Would you go? How many people would go? Well, that's kind of the situation society found itself in, and you think of supply chain managers, very similar kind of a situation. Live without a net is kind of how I would describe it. Impacts from people walking away from the supply chain operations, walking away from their duties because they just couldn't trust that they would stay healthy. Organizations and businesses having to shut down the services that they provide to supply chains. The situation was dire in the beginning and remained so for weeks, if not months afterward, in terms of the impact on the supply chain. We saw folks struggling to produce enough masks, face shields, gloves, and other personal protective equipment to keep frontline workers safe. The impact had much further reaching implications. Think about Disney. Disney's unable to suddenly provide the demand for food, the demand for electricity at its parks, the demand for labor to come and work and be what's the name that Disney uses with all of their people. They're not employees, they're, I guess, actors. But anyway, so huge disruption from raw materials all the way through all the value added services in your supply chains, all the way out to the customers that are going to need it. What this created, without human operators running the supply chain, yet, for instance, with PPE, toilet paper, paper towels, hand sanitizer, there was an absolute spike in demand. And on the other end, the supply of resources to actually meet that supply tanked. We lost workers, we lost the ability to move things in and out of countries due to restrictions of the lockdown. Probably created one of the largest, if not the most unprecedented supply-demand gap that society's seen. I think this is important to kind of recognize and understand as we set the scene here. The complications of this were far-reaching. Think of supplying medical students with firsthand ability to study, to meet in person with patients, to meet in the lab, to study, to conduct experimentation. Difficult to do in some cases. The lockdown, the shutdown hit all aspects of business, core operations. We hit a recession worldwide as a result of this. So all of this to say, this was the backdrop for probably the most accelerated adoption of technology that we've ever seen, or certainly seen in such a compressed period of time in society. With the supply chain, moving online, people moving to remote work, people having to manage remotely, whether it's other people or production lines, manufacturing, assembly, shipping, they're having to manage remotely. This brought more, a greater and larger digital footprint. With more people online conducting operations from home, there are more laptops at home. This meant that you've now got greater bandwidth demand in the residential communities, the last mile of the internet, so to speak. You've got greater demand for security protocols, for security software, for VPN services, virtual private network. You've got greater demand for the ability to work remotely in a VPN environment. Many organizations and operations across the supply chain, this is all new technology, never before used, never before implemented, certainly not implemented in a very fast fashion. If anyone thinks about it in advance, it might take months, if not years, to implement that kind of technology adoption. What we saw with that larger digital footprint and folks moving in the supply chain to buying online, more so than calling up their supplier on the phone or having a sales rep stop by. to talk to them about the next purchase. Things are happening online. They're happening more quickly. The complications from that, technology accelerates errors more quickly. That's an issue. So think about a supply chain. Now you've got retrograde that might have to, your return process that suddenly it gets clogged because people have accelerated their purchasing and they've purchased the wrong thing or too many of them. In some cases, with the large variation and volatility in the supply chain, demand supply kind of ratio. Let me back up just a second. That adoption of digital transformation and ability to manage work using technology also created a larger attack footprint, more vulnerabilities. For every laptop that was added, for every internet connected device that people rely on in their supply chain, the number of vulnerabilities goes up by a number greater than the number of devices, because you've got software, you've got account, you've got session, you've got lots of different ways that people can come into and attack your hardware, if you will. And even more when you talk about the number of software applications that are used across the supply chain to communicate and to share data and to share information. If we think about this, it's not just infrastructure in the supply chain. When you have 1 to n tiers of supply chain suppliers in your supplier network, you've got your first tier suppliers, but they have suppliers that are at the second level, and then the third level, and the fifth, and the ninth, and the 10th level. You've got now a large number of suppliers in your supplier network that are relying upon each other, but don't know each other. And when the digital footprint of all of those suppliers increases twofold, threefold, fivefold, tenfold, the number of vulnerabilities that are introduced expands exponentially. We've seen where those expansions in footprint have hurt. If you think about the SolarWinds attack that happened, that took place for months and months through the infrastructure of network equipment provider, and how that rippled through software updates pushed to the devices across federal, state, local, commercial, educational, and even residential or personal, equipment. Left a lot of vulnerability, and a lot of data was exposed and has been taken, by nefarious actors and exploited. So what do you do? What do you do with this huge footprint? How do you protect it? How do you tackle it? I don't have all the answers, but what I do know is with that digital footprint, there also comes opportunities. And technology in general has always been a place where we have opportunities at every turn. And I think in this case, technology, there are very sound ways to protect the infrastructure. There are very sound ways to protect your supply chain. If we think about the amount of data that people put on, and companies and businesses and supply chain players put on the internet just publicly, there's a lot of information that can be connected for good. We've heard the bad about social media, but there's good about some of the data that your suppliers put online, because we can see who they work for, who owns interest in their company, who's on their board of directors, whether there are loans associated with their business entity, or personal loans to people that are executive officers or leaders in the company. All of that information is available, and it can be assessed, and you can get a better idea and a better understanding of who is in your supply chain, regardless of what tier they participate at. Web scraping, artificial intelligence, machine learning. These things can all be applied, to predict the risk level of your supply chain. Analytics can also be used in your supply chain today with the volume of data that's now there to, again, help tackle that large volatility in the supply-demand gap that took place over COVID, over the pandemic here. The the analytics that are available and the techniques that have been matured are growing exponentially, and the artificial intelligence, machine learning, disciplines are every day growing in terms of maturity, leaps and bounds, and the tools and the capabilities that are available to even a lay person now who's not really familiar with coding and really deep technical analytics and applications are becoming the tools are becoming more accessible to them as those techniques and the tools for AI and ML mature. So we're seeing that happen, and that's a very exciting thing to see happen. In terms of supply chain, we're seeing the application of blockchain grow, especially if you think about food safety and transfers of products from one unknown supply chain member to another unknown supply chain member. The blockchain can leave that trail for you to be able to see and understand who's had possession and custody of things along the way. It's helpful that it's public, it's publicly available and accessible. Things like shelf life, ownership, asset value, quality. Did it come from the original manufacturer, or is it counterfeit? Blockchain can help tackle all of these things in the supply chain. We're excited to see some of the applications today in regard to blockchain. So I know I'm coming up to the bottom of the hour here, and I just would leave you with this. The acceleration from COVID has certainly taken place, and it continues. It's going to continue. The technology transformation, which really started, a couple decades ago with the advent of the internet and the personal computer, really has only accelerated in the last 6 months. It probably accelerated 5 years in a term of 6 months. So there's more to come. We don't know everything here certainly today, and we're not going to know for a long time the true implications in terms of technology and the supply chain and what took place because of COVID. But certainly these are some of the insights that we see today. So with that, Mert, back to you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for all the wonderful insights, and that was great. We will now take some questions from the audience. And here goes the first one. So supply chain agility and transparency, those are important factors in developing a resilient supply chain. Could you please explain the importance of technology in establishing a more agile and transparent supply chain?
Sure. So first of all, when I think of agile being a mindset. It's a mindset to be able to work in a condition that is kind of founded in empirical process theory. We're working with what we know. We don't have time or energy or resources to go and just do the research and the experimentation. We need to work with what we have available to us. And so when I think about supply chains and supply chain agility, we have to do just that, right? So thinking about that, what was the second part of the question, Mert?
Transparency.
Transparency, right? So there's, I think this is an area where there's really going to become a greater, first of all, recognition that transparency in the supply chain is vital, almost like open source software made an impact, and Linux and some of these open source softwares have have evolved and become very, very solid tools and applications in everyday life. And in part because of the transparency. And I can see the same approach playing out in supply chains. And hence, the adoption of blockchain is almost a nod to being transparent, to show, hey, I'm going to put out there for everyone to see that Nike produced this pair of sneakers, and here's the unique identifier for that pair of sneakers. So it can never be confused with another pair of sneakers of the same model or size. That kind of transparency, I think, is really important. How we do that in an agile manner will I think that's an interesting question. I think we'll have to see kind of how technology plays that one out. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, Here's another question. What is the private industry's role in cooperating with the federal and local governments to overcome supply chain challenges during disruptions like COVID-19?
That's a great question. I'm not a politics fan. I've lived in the DC area way too long to love politics one way or the other. It's kind of a love-hate thing. They're down the road, and I try to leave them alone. But it could take a political perspective, right? But I think the role of government in this is I think keeping industry from harming itself or the nation. And I don't think that there is a need to regulate fully. It's a tough question. I'll be honest with you. It's a tough question. There's risk in anything we do, and certainly technology has accelerated that risk. I think government's got to show a little restraint to let industry work things out, to let industry succeed and fail. Let them do both. It's where it crosses a line and becomes a threat to the nation, is where I see the federal government stepping in. In terms of local governments and intrastate commerce, I'm probably a little bit more conservative in the sense that I think industry is incentivized through all kinds of, through the market to do well, to get things right, and right being serve the customer that demands their products. And I think industry has shown time and time again that they band together, when they need to for their customers. So I think that's kind of where I fall right now. That's a tough question. I have to think about that one more for sure.
Well, thank you for giving your opinion on this. This question is more related to supply chain relationships. And, in your talk, you mentioned a few times about, when there are tiers of suppliers, sometimes they are sort of unknown to each other. So in this case, maybe as supply chain members, when they're building resilience in supply chains, what is the importance of trust, between the members of the supply chain in establishing collaborative relationships to overcome the challenges?
Yeah, so trust is vital, right? If you purchase something from a supplier and they don't deliver on time, or they don't deliver the quality that you'd agreed to, certainly you don't trust them the next time around. And that right there means they're not going to sell to you again. And usually that's an incentive to keep you honest, to keep you delivering on time, to keep you delivering in the quantity when you said you would. So I think there's almost that self-policing motive, right? That's going to say, hey, I'm not going to use that supplier if they can't deliver quality, quantity, of the product that I expect. Now, with that said, context of a pandemic, certainly those are external factors that anybody in a supply chain for face shields or ventilator equipment would see and know, wow, there's really an external force that's exerting, pressure and driving the success or failure of anyone in that supply chain. So you have to look at that trust in terms of a one-on-one relationship, but not ignore the fact that there is context that may be, across your whole. If you're sourcing, let's say, rubber to make tires, you need to understand that the people you're buying the rubber from may have an industry driver that's affecting all of the suppliers of rubber, that's breaking that trust, and then essentially they can't deliver, or there's quality issues in the rubber because of something industry wide across the rubber suppliers. So you have to look at the context, but yeah, certainly the one-on-one buyer seller in the supply chain link has got to look at trust individually and then trust across the context of what it is that's being supplied or purchased in the supply chain.
Well, great. And one last question, and this one's actually coming from me. And I'm very curious about, and this is less, related to the COVID disruptions, but the latest attack to the pipeline and its, impacts. And could you, give us your opinion on that and the resulting oil shortage?
Yeah, of course. So interesting, right? It's a supply chain of fuel. You would think, oh, they attacked the fuel pipeline. The infrastructure is shut down. Somebody isn't. They've gotten the IT systems that control the infrastructure. As far as I understand, that was not what they attacked, which was very interesting. That was the cause. That was the effect or the symptom of the attack. The true attack actually took place on the Colonial Pipeline Company's ability to invoice the customers of the gasoline that was flowing through the pipeline. So if you're running the pipeline and you're not able to see who's taking the gasoline out of your pipeline, how much they're taking, and you can't bill them for the gasoline that they're taking out of the pipeline, you're giving away free stuff, essentially. So I think the attack there, again, supply chain managers, be aware that spending time on your enabling capabilities really needs to expand to those systems and operations that are tangential to or integrated with your supply chain. In this case, the physical infrastructure was unharmed. It was untouched. But the Colonial Pipeline supply chain managers needed to actually look at, okay, how good is the rest of the infrastructure in the operations, the billing, the accounting departments, the physical security is one thing, the applications and ability to earn profit and pay your bills to your suppliers, through the accounting, invoice and receiving processes is also something you need to pay attention to nowadays, especially given the expanded footprint that all of our supply chain has in the ether. I think cyber is a new realm for supply chain, and I think it's going to become an increasingly large wedge of where supply chain planning and strategy takes place.
Absolutely, and it just goes to show how many different types of disruptions that supply chain managers have to deal with, on a day-to-day basis, from pandemics to cyber attacks to natural disasters to supplier issues, and so it's a very challenging career, and then of course for anyone who loves to solve problems, it's a great avenue to go in.
There's always another one. Yeah, for sure.
We have one additional question from our audience. Stephanie is asking, do you have any insight on changing customer expectations and related behavior given the increasing digital footprint?
Customer expectations and behavior. Interesting. Yeah, I think customer expectations, right? We think about the movement of, they've changed, right? We used to go to the shopping mall or to the store down the street to pick up our groceries or a new dress for the dance coming up. My daughter's going to prom here in a couple weeks. So everything's done online now. Expectations, are shifting. The ability to buy a home online, to fill out the forms, to sign the forms, is there. Customers expect and go to first. Again, accelerated by COVID. I'm going to order my food and have it delivered to the house, so I don't have to go to the grocery store. I'm going to order from Etsy because I can get custom, bespoke products that I can't get from a shopping mall or from Macy's or Walmart. I'm going to look for those unique things, and I'm going online to do it. So I think customer behavior, certainly as a demand from the supply chain, has shifted to being predominantly an online kind of experience for them. And I think that's the behavior that we're really seeing. Restaurants are paying. If you're an architect, you're in good business right now, because restaurants are paying architects like crazy. They're in high demand to redesign the interior of their restaurant because consumers' behaviors have changed. Eating in a restaurant, not so attractive right now. Eating outside the restaurant, more attractive. It gives you a destination. You're safe. You're outside. Who doesn't like to eat outside, except when it's freezing? But people, I think, are really behaving differently as a result of all this, for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Brian, for making the time to speak to our audience today. Your experience and insights on the supply chain technologies are truly invaluable. As we close our event today, we thank you again, Brian, and then I would like to remind our audience that we will have another wonderful speaker same time next week. Ms. Sherry Laubach of Merck Pharmaceutical Company will be with us, and we would love to see you join us again. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.